Let's come. Okay, brief Ramso Cabre, brief Safro Malfono,
Praise
slow-mo
Afro.
Taino. Again, good evening and welcome everyone. Okay, I would like to ask you to mute yourself if you don't mind during the lecture of Malfono. The lecture tonight will be followed by Q&A or some discussions if we still have time. No? Malfono, it is a great pleasure and honor for us to welcome you in our small group. For who doesn't know who's Malfono tonight, our speaker this evening is Dr. George Anton Kiraz, a name that is deeply familiar to the students and scholars of Syriac and Semitic language. He is living in USA right now, and Dr. Kiraz is a founder of George Press, a pioneering institutions in the publication of Syriac and Eastern study. He's also the creator of Bet Morduto. By the way, Malfono George Kiraz, the idea come out to invite you to talk with us during our study and then searching for the present tense of the conjugation of the verb. And we couldn't find present tense instead of participle. I think it's a participle, right? And then one of my students, which is Duita, say, why not invite him? Why not invite Malfono and then explain to us what is the present tense in the conjugation? Anyway, that's brief about the introduction. I don't want to, give some more introduction about George Kiraz. Everyone over here, Malfono, recognize you, and we study your book. We brought your bit more duto. So thank you very much for creating such a wonderful a platform. It benefits us a lot. Okay, and tonight themes is supposed to be a Syria from a personal, timeless, patient to lesson for us, for all of us. But our last communication by email, Malfono, you asked me what kind of theme should I talk tonight, and I offer you three themes. The first one is why Syriac matters, a forgotten key to the language of revelation, and the second one is Syriac, the missing link between Hebrew, Arabic, and early Islam. And the third one is recovering Syriac language, scriptures, and interpretations. Malfono, you are free to choose with the themes. I know you are an expert on that. We don't have any doubt about it. And indeed, Malfono, we are truly grateful to welcome you tonight for your generosity of your time. And without further ado, it is my great honor to invite our speaker tonight, Dr. George Anton Kiraz. Please.
Thank you so much for this very kind introduction. I would also like to thank you for inviting me to talk to your group. Before COVID, these things maybe were possible, but we did not think about them. But after COVID, the world became closer and closer, and Zoom, which we did not hear about before COVID, it did exist, but we did not hear about it, became our common room. So we are all sitting in the same room, regardless of our distance. Today's talk will be informal, and if anybody would like to ask questions, we can do that at the end. I will give you a brief overview of what Syriac is. I will try to uh, maybe talk a bit about the points that Sapri mentioned, and we will see where the session will take us. Syriac belongs to a larger Aramaic family of languages. So there is, for example, ancient Aramaic. Sometimes it's called official Aramaic because it was the language of empires. There are Aramaic forms or variants that are used by Jewish communities. So we call them Jewish Aramaic. There are forms used by Christian communities. We call it Christian Aramaic. The Mandaeans, who are a special religious group from southern Iraq, also use Aramaic. So Mandaic is a form of Aramaic. And like we're speaking now in English because I cannot speak your language and you cannot speak my language. So English is a lingua franca. That means it's an international language. It is the language of business. Aramaic was the language of business and it was international language from about the 7th century before Christ until the 7th century after Christ, when Arabic began to replace it as the lingua franca. That means not everybody who wrote in Aramaic or who later wrote in Syriac is specifically ethnically, whatever we mean by ethnically, this is a modern term. No matter what we mean by the term ethnic, it doesn't mean they're ethnically Syriac or Aramaeans or Aramaic speakers. You could belong to different groups and you could be writing in this language because it is the international language. And Syriac in particular is one of these Aramaic forms. We think that it is most likely the local language of Edessa or Orhoi. But even from its earliest times, from the times we receive Syriac literature, we see that a formal form of this language, a written form, those of you who are in Jakarta who may know Arabic, a Fusha form, so to speak, of this language became kind of standard and used by people in Persia, in Mesopotamia, in the Levant, in Syria, in Arabia, all of them writing in this same formal language. That means at home they probably did not speak this language because we know in Persia they spoke Persians and in the Arabian Peninsula some form of Arabic. But when they took the pen and they started writing, especially if it was Christian literature, then they decided to write in this language so that everybody can understand. The earliest evidence of Syriac as we know it, when we talk about Syriac, is an inscription from the year 6 after Christ, or 6 of the Common Era. These are secular inscriptions. Sometimes they call them pagan inscriptions. Pagan doesn't mean they are religiously pagan. It just means that it's not Christian literature. So I don't always like this term pagan. They are inscriptions on tombs. George Kiraz, built this tomb for me and for my family, and things like that. There are about 100, a bit more than 100 or so of these inscriptions in the first 3 centuries of the Christian era or of the Common Era. There are also 3 parchments. These are continuous texts. They are deeds of sale or about lending. I lend you money and you have to pay it back. They are also written in this form of Syriac. We call that the Old Syriac. Then we start to receive Syriac literature, literary texts, that is. Of course, there must have been a lot of literary texts that did not survive. Eusebius of Caesarea says that he visited Edessa and he entered the library and he saw many, many, many books written in this language. We don't have these books. So that means there was a lot of literature written, but we can only talk about what we have received or what we know about. The earliest texts that we received are the books of the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament translated into Syriac. We know that most of the Hebrew Bible by the end of the 2nd century was translated into Syriac. This is what we call the Pshita. And the reason we know that by the end of the 2nd century it was translated, because we don't have manuscripts from the 2nd century, but we know it was translated by the end of the 2nd century because 3rd and 4th century authors are quoting from this Pshita, and the text that they quote is the same Pshita we have today. So that's why we know they were translated. The question is who translated them? It is a link with Judaism, of course, but the people who translated it, is it like the Septuagint? Is it Jewish people translating it for their own use? Is it Christian people? And what is Christian people anyway in the 1st or 2nd century, or Jewish people? It is difficult to tell because things are still developing. But by the end of the day, what became the Christian church adopted this translation and became the Bible of Eastern Christianity, giving them access to the Old Testament or to the Hebrew Bible. And we also notice that the writings of the church fathers, especially the early church fathers, is very much rooted in the Old Testament, in Hebrew literature. And that's why we always say that Syriac Christianity has a Semitic background, not a Hellenistic background. It has a Semitic background. Our Malfono, our real Malfono, berabad-abad, Sebastian Brock, talks of the church having 3 lungs, not 2 lungs. There's a missing lung that scholars until recently, thanks to Sebastian, this changed, but until recently have been ignoring. We know about the Greek lung. This is the Eastern Christian lung, and by Eastern we mean Greek. Eastern according to Europe, Eastern. And then there is the Western lung, which is the Latin lung. But Sebastian Brock pointed out the 3rd lung, which is the Syriac lung. And in order to have a complete picture of early Christianity, of those formative years, it's very important then to study also Syriac literature. Syriac then is a very important linkage with the Hebrew world and with the world of the Old Testament. And the importance of Syriac is because of the early manuscripts that survive. we have many manuscripts that are dated. The date is written on them that are from the 5th century. The earliest dated manuscript, and I believe not only Syriac manuscript, it's the earliest dated manuscript in any language, is the 411 Codex in the British Library now, from Der Syrian, from the Syriac monastery in Egypt originally. So we have a lot of these manuscripts that are dated to the 5th century, and also we have undated manuscripts. They could be from the 4th century. Imagine before the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls that our earliest manuscripts of the Old Testament were from the 9th, 10th century, while we had a translation of those in the Pshito with physical manuscripts we can touch from the 4th and the 5th century. Of course, with the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, we have now access to earlier Hebrew manuscripts. So this is the linkage with Judaism. Let's talk about the linkage with early Islam. As I said, the form that writers chose to write in those formative years was Syriac. And this also includes Arabic Christianity. We know that Christianity was in Arabia and southern Syria, southern Iraq, which is adjacent to Arabia, as far as Najran in the south, was active in the 4th, 5th, 6th century. A lot of the Arab tribes were Christian tribes, some were Jewish tribes, and those tribes either belonged to what is today called the Syriac Orthodox Church or to the Church of the East. Both Syriac using, or both are churches with a Syriac rite. That means their liturgy is Syriac. So we have a close connection also with Arabia. And then Islam, of course, grew in this milieu, in this society, where literature was written in Syriac. So people today now try to study any linkage between early Islam and between Syriac. And sometimes you have to read between the lines. Sometimes it's not very obvious. For example, at the time of Jacob of Surug, so we are talking before Islam, how did people pray in the church? Were they sitting like we are sitting today on benches, on churches? What were they doing? There is a memro, that means there's a homily, a poem by Jacob of Surug on the destruction of Amida. Amida is Diyarbakir now in southeastern Turkey. The Persians came and they destroyed Amida. And he is describing it, of course, in a poetic manner. And he is saying the priests are no longer praising you, the deacons are not singing. And then he uses the word sedre. I don't know if you know the word sedra or sedro. You may know it from the Beth Mardutho dictionary resource we did for you. Sedro means it is something that is ordered. If you make a list of things to do, A, B, C, D, I'm going to do this today. This is a sedro. In fact, there is a liturgical genre called sedro because it's a list of petitions. And he says the cedros, plural, the cedre of the faithful is no more inside the church, which means that people stood in cedre, in lines, and the closest image you can get of it is from modern day. I posted, I remember on Facebook, this poem with the faithful, the Muslim faithful from a mosque, and how they are standing in rows. And sometimes you see this linkage between some Syriac literature and between the Islamic tradition. Of course, no religion is better than any other religion, and nobody is better than anybody else. This is not the point, but the point is, how do cultures contact each other? Yeah. How does contact affect the transformation of knowledge, of practices between cultures? And in the Middle East, people of various backgrounds, whether they're pagan, Muslim, Christian, Mandaic, and there's so many different religious groups, how they interacted, how they learned from each other, and how they affected each other. So in early Islam, there was also contact, and contact is bidirectional. When I am in touch with you, if Sapri and I are friends and we start hanging out all the time, my personality will start rubbing on him, but his personality will also start rubbing on me. We see this, for example, in the literature of, or the genre of grammar. It is most likely that the Arabic grammatical tradition was influenced by Syriac. Jacob of Edessa wrote a treatise on grammar. The dots of Syriac, you may have learned them, or maybe you didn't get to them. But when Syriac wants to distinguish between a word like melko, king, or melko, melko, advice, they put a dot above melko and a dot below melko. And if you make this dot a bit like a stroke, you could see where the fatha in Arabic comes, and where the kasra comes, a, which is under, or e. So you see this linkage, and how in Arabic inherits a bit of Syriac here and there. But then later, after the Abbasid period, when there is a lot of Arabic literature, and where the Arabic grammatical tradition develops even further and further, later Syriac grammarians like Ilya Barshinaya, Ilya of Terhan, Barabroyo, they now are influenced by the Arabic grammatical tradition, because that developed on its own. So we always say that linkage and interaction and borrowing is bidirectional within society. So that shows us we talked about the linkage of Syriac to the Jewish tradition, and the linkage of Syriac to the Arabic tradition. There's also linkage of Syriac to the Greek tradition, be it Christian or be it the earlier philosophical writings. So starting from the 4th and the 5th century, a lot of Greek literature was translated into Syriac. Most of the philosophical work, Aristotle, Plato, and whatnot, were translated into Syriac. And when during the Abbasid period, there was a push in Baghdad to translate more and more works into Syriac, into Arabic, It was Syriac translators like Hunayn ibn Ishaq and others who were the cornerstone of this movement. In the beginning, they found it difficult to translate into Arabic. So even if the Greek work needed to be translated in Arabic and there was no Arabic version of it, no Syriac version of it, they will translate it first into Syriac. And then from the Syriac, they'll translate it into Arabic because Syriac and Arabic are sister languages, Semitic languages. Then little by little, they developed this technique. They said, okay, now we know enough, we can translate directly from Greek into Arabic. And we know that these sciences are the sciences that later on, through Andalusia, through Spain, were translated from Arabic into Latin and are the cornerstone or the backbone of modern Western sciences. So Syriac played a role in this, was a bridge between the Greek philosophy and the sciences and Arabic philosophy and sciences during the Abbasid period. So this is in terms of Syriac's contribution, not to Jewish or Muslim or Christian knowledge, but to civilization in general. For example, the earliest attestation of what we call the Arabic numbers, the digits that you type every day, 1, 2, 3, 4. These are Indic numbers from India. But the earliest attestation that, oh, the Indians have numbers, let's use them, is in a Syriac text. That is the earliest attestation. So this is the contribution to kind of our world civilization. Staying a bit with the Greek, we know that during the 5th century and then 6th century later on, there was a lot of disputes between the Christian communities or within Christianity about Christology. Christology is the nature of Christ. What is Christ? Yeah. Is he human? Is he divine? What is the relationship between the humanity and the divinity? Is it one nature? Is it two natures? All of this business that is regarding Christ, we call it Christology. And Greek people who were bickering about these things, they wrote books against each other. And these books were translated into Syriac. And some of these people, some of these big writers, later, in the eyes of Greek Christianity, became heretical. It is similar to the Islamic notion of takfir or kufr. They became heretical. They declared them heretical. And then they don't want their books, of course. So one of these people, for example, is Severus of Antioch, who wrote many, many books. Another writer is Theodore of Mopsuestia, who wrote commentaries on the Bible. And in fact, the Syriac tradition commentaries derives from him. Their books were no longer accepted in the Greek world. Scribes stopped copying them, and they are lost. We don't have them. But all these books are preserved in Syriac because they were translated into Syriac, and Syriac Christianity, be it the Church of the East or the West Syriac Church, copied these books. And this is now we have access to these Greek writings that would have gotten lost. So Syriac is a linkage also there for the preservation of lost Greek writings. So we've seen the linkage with Judaism, with Islam, but also with other Christianities. Of course, Greek to the Syriac world is West. We don't want to stay with our European notion of what's East and what's West. And through Syriac, we can recover a lot of these books. More importantly, and this is always when people ask, why is Syriac important? So we tell them important for Judaism, important for Islam, important for the Greek. But we should also not forget that Syriac is important for Syriac. Syriac does not always have to be a tool for something else.
Yeah.
So we also need to study Syriac, appreciate Syriac culture itself. And there is a lot of richness there. Even the contribution to world civilization that we talked about, even though most of these books about mathematics and medicine and chemistry and natural sciences, although we did not receive them. And the reason we did not receive them is that later on, monks in monasteries were not interested in these texts. So that's why we did not receive them. But we're not only hypothetically talking about them. From the Arabic Islamic tradition, we know about them. Not only we know about them, we know about many people who wrote books, and we even know the titles of the books. For example, Ibn Abi Usaybi'a has a book called Tabaqat al-Atibba, the ranks of physicians. And one of the chapters, I believe it's chapter 8, it is the Tabaqat of the Syriac physicians. And he says, such and such wrote a book in Syriac about this, and it was translated into Arabic. Or maybe it's a Syriac person who wrote it in Arabic directly. So we have a kind of catalog. We can make a catalog of dozens and dozens of books whose titles we know, whose content we know, but we don't have the book. So this is always our history when we say we can only talk about what we've received, but also sometimes we can talk about what has been written about. Maybe we did not receive it, but we know about it. And the scholars who study Syriac are always usually interested in the first millennium, that means the first 1,000 years, because again, they are using Syriac as a tool to get to the Hebrew Bible, to get to the Greek New Testament, to learn variants from the Pshita about other things, to study early Islam. But as I said, Syriac can be studied on its own right, and Syriac doesn't stop in the first millennium. Syriac goes on after the first 1,000 years in the 2000s. Sorry, not in the 2000s, in the after 1000, 1100, 1200, and all the way until our modern times. So after the year 1000, there's a consolidation of Syriac literature. People start writing larger books, collecting data, maybe also influenced by Arabic that has multi-volume books. So writers like Barsalibi and Barabroyo, they start writing encyclopedia type books consolidating knowledge. And while after the 13th century, we have a decline, 14th, 15th, 16th century, we have a bit of a decline. But then in the early modern period, during the Ottoman times, we start hearing about other writers. Every century, we know about a number of writers. So the Syriac production does not die, of course. It goes on. And then that takes us all the way during the Ottoman period until the end of the 1000s, until the year 2000. And by now, the Syriac communities, or the communities that use Syriac, are very small, probably a few 100,000 from the Church of the East, few 100,000 from the West Syriac Church or the Syriac Orthodox Church. And they are living within the Ottoman Sultanate. And in the late 1800s, things become difficult. There are internal difficulties, and especially 1895, there are massacres that are committed against the Christian communities of Southeast Turkey, began primarily against the Armenians, but it covered other communities as well, including the Syriac community. And then with World War I, and especially in 1915, there was another set of massacres. People today use the term genocide. Of course, the term did not exist. That also reduced the size of the Syriac communities hugely. And then people started migrating from where they were. Typically, they lived in Upper Mesopotamia, what is today Southeast Turkey. Of course, it was all Ottoman Empire. It was not countries. But then with the coming of the French and the British and the division of the Ottoman Sultanate into different regions of influence, British in Iraq, what later became Iraq and Palestine, French in Syria and Lebanon. These became different countries, and then people started moving south after the 1915 massacres, or to the diaspora, to America or to South America. And in the 1960s, people started moving again and again from Southeast Turkey to Europe now. There's a huge Syriac presence in Europe now, of course, in Australia, in New Zealand, and in all countries. That today the number of Syriac people outside of the Middle East is far more than the number of people within the Middle East. We forgot to talk about the Syriac presence in India. It goes back to old times. Of course, tradition takes it back to the time of St. Thomas. We know from historical records of connections with Syriac Christianity from the 7th century. So it must have been before. It was a linkage with the Church of the East, and later on a linkage with the Syriac Orthodox Church as well. And today there are more Syriac Christians in India than, of course, in the Middle East. Between all the denominations, I don't know how many millions, but definitely more than 5 million. You put all the Syriac Christians of the Middle East, the different denominations, they may approach 1 million. But in India alone, there are maybe 5 to 8 million. I don't know how many really. And now in South America, there are some activities where people are joining the Syriac church. So you have some growth now in South America. So it's a long history of about 2,000 years of Syriac Christianity. And I encourage you to to study the language and study about the culture, it's always good to know about other people's cultures. Now I want to know more about Indonesia. So thank you very much for listening, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Malfono. What an incredible articulations that bring us to the history, back to the ancient times, Middle Age, until modern times. I wasn't wrong when I start my class teaching Syriac. I say that I told to my student that what's the purpose of learning Syriac? Many people in Indonesia consider that Syriac is a dead language, and nobody will talk, and nobody will, no book or nothing, and it has no connection with the Indonesians, even cultures. And my argument is, yes, it is a big connection, our Islamic traditions with the Syriac traditions. As you are explaining us today, we discover that it has a strong connection, Syriac traditions. You mentioned that Sedra, wow, and you mentioned a Sedra that, in order. Um, in Hebrew, they call Sidura, Sidur. Well, actually, we have that also in Indonesia. We call Ratib. Ratib. In Arabic, it's also Ratib, Sedra. And they are all in the same tradition, praying that put in order. So, and standing as the Amida, we are standing that in order. So that's kind of interesting, to be discussed more probably. And and then the relation of the tradition of Christianity of the Eastern, while there is the Hellenistic you mentioned before. And my conclusion is learning Syriac language, not only learning the language, but also may bring you to the ancient times, tradition, the connections, the engagement between the three traditional religions. Okay, so I will start, and okay, I know there's a lot of questions now coming from the right side, and we have four. While I want to take this advantage as a moderator, I'm sorry for my friend. I would like to ask first before other ask the questions. Malfono, I'm sorry for that. Uh, you didn't mention a big name during your lecture tonight, which is my big name, Mar Afram. Um, I would like you to also to explain about what's the connections and who is the Mar Afram and what his contributions to as a person, the man, because I hear this huge name, big name, but we don't know much about him. And one of the reasons why I study Syria because I want to discover who this big man, Marafram. But I think what I believe that learning also Syria, we may discover something beautiful in Marafram, like what we discover in Rumi or others big name, Hafiz, and we miss that in Indonesia. We only know Hafiz, we only know Rumi, and why not? Because I believe Marafram has influenced also to the next generation of a person like Rumi and others. That was my questions, Malfono.
Yes, you are right. Mar Afram is a big name, and the reason he is a big name is because of his writings. We don't know that much about him in terms of his biography. We know that he was born in Nisibis or Nisibin. Nisibin is a city that in all its history was a border city until today. Today it is on the border between Turkey and Syria. I entered that many gate 2 or 3 times. Yeah, you open the gate, you enter, and you are in Nisibis from Syria, and also bordering Iraq. But it was a border city between the Persian Empire and the Byzantine Empire. And it will change because of wars. One time will be under this or under that. And during his lifetime, in the 300s, the Persians conquered it, and people had to leave. Like refugees today leave because of wars. He became a refugee. He went to Amida, and from Amida, he went to Edessa. The last parts of his life were in Edessa. That's all what we know about him. And we know that he was not a priest or a bishop, he was a simple deacon. He was a simple deacon, the lowest ranks in the church. What also we know about him is that he taught women how to sing in the church. And he may be the inventor of the choirs in the church, women singing in the church. He gave women a voice. St. Paul in the New Testament, he said women should be quiet. He unquieted them, gave voice to the women. More importantly, his poetry has theology in it. Not theology with arguments like Plato and Aristotle, like philosophical. I talked about the later Severus and Theodore of Mopsuestia, who wrote in Greek, but those wrote based on Greek philosophy. Ephraim wrote poetry, not analytics. Yeah, poetry that people can follow and people can chant. And it's the beauty of theology within poetry. Something that is one of the characteristics of Syriac Christianity. And in fact, some of his hymns that he wrote are still chanted in the church today. You go to kids in Syriac churches, they can sing them. Of course, many of his hymns are not chanted anymore, but some have survived. The question is, how and is there a linkage between Ephraim and later poets like Hafiz and Rumi? This has not been studied very well. And unfortunately, many Syriac scholars don't know Arabic. Arabists don't know Syriac. But this is unfortunate, because if you know Arabic, it's not difficult. Syriac is far easier than Arabic. It's very easy to go from Arabic into Syriac. Very, very easy. More difficult to go from Syriac to Arabic, because Arabic is a bit more complex than Syriac. Yeah.
Taudisagi Malfono. Taudisagi. Okay, I'm going to the question that has been posted. You can also direct us to Malfono, but first I would like to read the 5 questions now going in the chat room. First question coming from Muhammad Arif Wibowo. He has 2 questions. Number 1 is, among classic Arabic, classic Hebrew, and classic Syriac, which one is close to the Proto-Semitic language in terms of phonology and grammar? That was number 1 question. And number 2 question is, what features of Proto-Semitic are retained in Syriac but lost in classic Arabic and classic Hebrew?
Yeah. So let's talk about the Semitic families. So Hebrew and Syriac or Aramaic, among those three that you mentioned, are closer to each other because they are northwest Semitic languages, with Phoenician, Canaanite, and others. So they are closer together as a block. Then we have northeast Semitic languages like Akkadian. That was the language of the Assyrian Empire, for example, and the Babylonian Empire. Then classifications in Semitic keep changing, of course. Arabic used to be thought of as southern, with Ethiopic, for example, but now it's considered more central, and some of the dialects of Yemen and the south are considered as part of the southern dialects. What is retained sometimes, because Arabic came later, we think that it lost more things. But that's not always the case. Sometimes it's what comes later retains earlier things, because Arabic was within the Arabian Peninsula, and I always say not too many trains were going in and out. It was isolated for many, many centuries before Islam. It retained some of early Semitic features. So, for example, the case endings, the i'rab in Arabic, is old a Semitic feature. You find it in Akkadian. You also find it in Ugaritic. So we have what we call nunation, the tanween. Kitab, kitaban, kitabun, kitabin. In Ugaritic, for example, or in Akkadian, it will be with a meme. Kitabam, kitabim, kitabum. And with the same grammatical system. If it's a subject, it is marfu', it is u or un. If it is accusative, maf'ul bihi, then it will be an. In the case of Akkadian, it will be am, not an, but it's the a. And if it's prepositional, it will be e. So this is one of the things that are retained in Arabic. Another thing that is retained in Arabic is the af'al, the awzan, the measures. Fa'ala, fa'ala, af'ala, tafa'ala. Yeah. All Semitic languages are built on this system. The question is, how many of these do you have? In Arabic, you have over 15. Of course, only about 10 are common, but there are about 15 in Arabic. Syriac only has 4. Fa'ala, fa'ala, af'ala. And there is also the reflexive of those. You could argue 8. And Hebrew has a bit more, but less than Arabic. The system is the same. All of them are what we call root and pattern morphology. You have the root that gives you the notion, but they differ in terms of what the sense is. Also, all of these languages, they have what we call the past tense, like kataba, and then the yaktubu. In Arabic, yaktubu is the present tense. And maybe this is what's confusing you when you talk about present tense. Arabic, kataba, yaktubu is the present tense. Yaktubu in Syriac, which is with a noon, niktub, is not the present tense, it is the future tense. So the same form is used for something else. That's the future tense. So these are the things that were retained in these different languages.
How this Malfono? That was related to your platform that we were looking for the present tense. instead of finding it as a participle. So it's supposed to be, we couldn't find the present tense in your platform, Malfono. We only see past tense and future tense and past participle out of the passive one, the passive one. So maybe you can explain to us a little bit about what's going on with the. I want to so okay. Maybe I will go to your platform. I want to show the platform over here, Malfono. Uh, excuse me. Okay, over here we only see imperfect. Okay, perfect is past
Yeah,
tense.
perfect is the past tense. You go down, imperfect is the future tense. This is what is equivalent to Arabic yaktubu, and then you have the imperative, and then the present tense is the active participle.
It's the one present tense.
This is the present tense. That is the present tense.
Yes, Malfono. But pay attention over here. You only have a 4 conjugation over here. I think you missed a second person futures. The chronoid.
Yes, because in the present tense there is only these 4 forms, and in order to make a second person or a first person, you have to add the pronoun. So the one that you have open is bola in the singular masculine. Bola. If I want to say I bola, then bola no. You bola, bola at. It does not change. And the same thing with bol'a, with the feminine. And with bol'in, bol'in atun, atun. All of you bol'in. Yeah? Or bol'in hnan. All of us bol'in. So you just add that. In my primer, that should be in chapter 4.
Right, I got it. Yeah, I see. I find it here, but I couldn't find in your platform.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, Malfono, very nice. And let's go to the second, the second question of here coming from Muhammad Haidar Izzuddin. Okay, I first study Arabic and then Hebrew, and I noticed many similarity between the two, and which made learning Hebrew much easier for me. How is the Syriac in comparison? How closely related it is to Arabic and Hebrew? And does a background in this language help in learning Syriac? Can you give me some examples?
Yes. So I always say that if you know 2 Semitic languages, the third one comes for free. It should not be too difficult. If your Arabic is good, and I'm sure it is, if you already read Hebrew grammar, then Syriac should be quite easy. First of all, a lot of the vocabulary you already know. You don't have to learn that ktobo is kitab and halbo is halib and koso is kas, and you don't have to learn any of this. People struggle with vocabulary when they learn languages. The conjugation system of the verbs. Again, you have kataba, yaktubu, ktab, niktub. You just have to learn that in Syriac. It is na, niktub, and not yaktub. That's all. And then the af'al, as I mentioned, are only 4. With their reflexive becomes maybe 8. So it's quite standard. In terms of difficulty, I would say Arabic is the most difficult, then Hebrew, then Syriac. Reading Syriac script is also, once you learn it, of course. Once you learn it, it is also easy because the letters are distinguished from each other. Yes, ba and ka kind of look the same sometimes, but they are graphs on their own. They are not like in Arabic, the dent of ba. It could be ba and ta and tha and na and ya. And imagine in manuscripts, the dot will not even be there in Arabic. So for example, if you have the word natija or tatawaja, maybe the second ta will have two dots, the first one will not have dots. Is it binge? Is it nataj? Is it, what is it? Huh? So when you read older manuscripts, you will be praying for Syriac, not for Arabic, because it is so much easier. And we did not talk about Gershuni. Gershuni is the writing of Arabic in the Syriac script. Once I teach it to my students who know Arabic, then of course they prefer to read Gershuni. It's so much easier. The Arabic script is more difficult. So I think you should be able in a short period of time to learn Syriac.
That was my experience, Malfono. Izudin, buy two, get one free.
Yes.
That's why. Yeah, indeed, Malfono, that's learning Syriac after learning Arabic and Hebrew, it seems that very easy language. All right, now let's move to the next question because we run out of the time. Malfono also will be busy, and I think okay, I will read one more question over here, Malfono. From Hendra, I have some questions. Malfono, George Kiraz. First, my Greek language in Christianity joined Hebrew and Syriac in Christianity Bible. Greek is Hellenic family language, not Semitic language. Second, are Syriac Aramaic language using in Russia as Christian Orthodox religion in Russia. Third is Turkish or Russian, Persian, Greek have some common word with Syriac. Last question is how I can mastering for learning Syriac. If a media like George, like you, is not very many available when I try to, yeah, you are the living person that we have in the history now, Malfono.
So, so let's talk about the various languages you mentioned. If you know Greek, of course, that does not help you to learn Syriac because the grammatical system and everything is very different. The only thing that you will get is free words because there are many Greek loan words in Syriac. So, for example, sphero, it's also common with English. I always tell my students, if the word is in Syriac and in English, that means it's from Greek. So a ball or a sphere, sphero, that comes from Greek. Patriarch, patriarcho, patriarch, philosophia, philosophy, things like that. So you have many words that will come for free, but that's about it. Only the lexicon.
Taudi Malfono. I have one more last question. I think this is very important for our academic in Indonesia. And the question from Ahmad Salahuddin and Pate from Malaysia is about is there any influence of Syria in the Al-Quran? What do you think about
any influence of Syriac in Al-Quran? There are. Go ahead.
Continue with what do you think about Christoph Luxemburg in his thesis about the Quran? That was the number one, the question. And number two, the last question is from Malaysia. It is possible that Sheikh Abu Aswad Duali, who placed the line harakat of the Quran, study Semitic language such as the Hebrew and Aramaic? That's the last question that we.
Yes. So the relationship between the Syriac and the Quran, there are books like Jeffrey's the foreign vocabulary of the Quran. I told you there are many Greek words in Syriac, and I'm sure in Malaysia you have many Arabic words in your language, and maybe now you have many English words. It is natural through contact for words to go from one language to another. So you find a lot of Syriac words that occur in the Quran. For example, Al-Furqan foruko, for example, will be there, and sometimes the meaning will change. Hanfo, for example, Hanif, the meaning becomes opposite. Hanfo in Syriac is somebody who is pagan actually, but in the Quran, in Islam, it becomes somebody who is righteous. Like Abraham is Hanif in the Quran. So there are things like this. There are books like Christopher. Of course, this is not his real name. He is from Lebanon, from a Syriac background. Building on some works by Mengana and others, I think these theories go a bit too far, claiming that you have to read the Quran with a Syriac eye in order to understand it, in order to comprehend it. I don't think any of these arguments have been argued well, and I don't think I myself don't buy these arguments because they are all speculative. There is nothing concrete about them. That's my view of them. As for Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali, in terms of putting the harakat, I think the dotting system of Syriac definitely had influence on the harakat. I mentioned the fatha and the kasra and how they came into being. So I think, yes, there is a borrowing there, and there's an influence there. That's why I mentioned that the early grammatical tradition of Arabic takes from Syriac, and then the later Syriac grammatical tradition then takes back from Arabic the description of grammatical terminology.
Malfono, we are unfortunately we agree that your lecture will take. It is so wonderful to listen from you. I think some of attendants over here are your fans. It's very fun of you. Let's bring Malfono. I hope this type of invitations in the future we can invite you one more time to talk with us in the different topic and different ambience. One last word I would like to have from you. What is your word for us in Indonesia or Southeast Asia relating to your academic professionals, Malfono?
I think that it is important for everybody to study different cultures and to study the different aspects of life. Syriac is tiny and so small. When it comes to word politics, it doesn't even exist in terms of word politics and the world we live in today. But it is important to be aware that Syriac people are still around us. Their history affects our history. There is no our history and their history in this world. History and civilization belongs to everybody, and this is why we should all embrace it and try to learn it if we're interested in learning languages and learning cultures.
Thank you very much, Taudi Sagi Malfono. We know that you are very busy, and again, one more time, I would like to thank you on behalf of all my friends in Indonesia, Malaysia. Thank you very much, Malfono, Taudi Sagi, and then see you again.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Taudi Sagi Malfono.
Lomedem, and we say Yeomotobo, and we say Fushun Bashlomo means remain in peace. Fushun Bashlomo.
Oh, I have taken a picture of us.
Yes.
I have taken the pictures and then I will share in our group. And if you don't mind, Malfono, can I share your email also to all the participants, maybe they will ask, they have extra question, another
Yes.
question, they will consider. Don't mind if I share your email to them?
Yes, it should be fine.
Tahu disagi,
לא
tahu.
יודע.
Yo, Shlomo, ha? Question me
יום
Shlomo, tahu
טוב.
disagi.
Beri tahu, dia mau tahu Malfono, tahu di sagi.
Tahu di, tahu